Well, hello everyone. My name is Laurie Smith, and this is April Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Awareness Month down in the States. And I always usually broadcast during the month of April. And this year, I decided to do 30 shows, but unfortunately, I took about six off, so 5 or 6 off. So it won't be quite 30, but I really wanted to broadcast for this month, just to be one more voice out here, just speaking about the issues about child abuse, speaking about child abuse prevention, and just so that it doesn't get shoved under the carpet. Like the more voices there are in on this, the better. And so that's what I'm doing. It's a very, obviously child abuse is a disturbing topic. Most people don't really want to listen to it unless they themselves were abused or they know, they work with children and they are, work in child protection or they're, interested in preventing child abuse. So we're continuing on tonight looking at sibling abuse and sibling violence, sibling abuse. That's something that a lot of people I think don't know a lot about just because unless you were, a lot of people may have been somewhat abused by a sibling at some point, but um, this is not like, uh, siblings that are just playing and, being a little bit rough. We're talking, this is systematic abuse, and it's actually considered to be abuse because it is. And so we're going to take a look at this PDF I found. This PDF is awesome, and I think I did include the link in the information below in the show page information. If not, I'm going to put it there, and I'll tell you what it is. It's from www.vaw learning network.cg or ca.ca, and it's /issue -21 sibling violence. So it's VAW learning network.ca. They're the ones that put this PDF out. This is a great PDF. You can find it on their website. I just found it by searching out sibling abuse. It's written by Linda Baker, who's a learning director, Diane Lalonde, research associate, and Jasmine Tabibi, research associate. And I just found it to be so thorough. Um, I mean, they're covering really the entire gamut of the issues of sibling abuse, which a lot of people don't consider to be abuse, and they talk about that. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I appreciate everybody who's been tuning into my shows, and I'm sorry I missed a few. I actually had a kind of a bad set of allergies, sort of for a couple of days, but I'm not sure if it was a cold or allergies. But I really wasn't feeling well. I had to take several shows off. Then I got busy with work, and so unfortunately, yeah, I missed a few shows. But I'm glad to be back, and I should be broadcasting now every night through the end of April. So I appreciate your support. Thank you for everything you're doing to help stop and prevent child abuse. It means a great deal to me because I was abused as a child. And, I'm glad to be here today. When I was younger, I wouldn't have said that. And so, I've learned to love and enjoy life and, learn to find good stuff in this life where so many people who have been abused or, suffered so much in their childhood or youth because they were abused, um, quite often end up taking their own lives or, just don't do well in life and end up, addicted to drugs or alcoholism or whatever. And it's a terrible, terrible situation. So that's why I just appreciate everybody who's doing anything to help stop and prevent child abuse. And I one of the reasons I wasn't here for one of the days was because I was doing a project with Donna Shearer and Lee Roberts out of Advocates United for Humanity, and they've got a petition going. It's their own personal petition, Donna Shearer and Lee Roberts. It's not the organization, but they've got a petition going. It's going to go to the national government level in the United States to to pass a law, and that will help prevent and stop some child abuse. And so it's wonderful. I'm so excited about it. Their information is on my discussion tab. So if you go to my discussion area, I've actually posted that petition. It's change.org petition that's going around. You can add your name if you feel that it's something you can get behind, and it's just going to protect children from abuse. It's just wonderful. So I really appreciate what they're doing. It's amazing. So this is learningnetwork.ca, sibling violence. We're just looking at this PDF. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can get this if you're interested in it from their website, and you can read through the whole thing. It's just so thorough and really, really well done. It's only 8 pages, but they've really covered everything. They said sibling violence is a common form of family violence, yet it's often overlooked. And they said sibling violence is the physical, emotional, and or sexual abuse of one sibling by another. It is not the everyday squabbles, rivalry, or physical playing between siblings. Sibling violence often involves a power imbalance that makes it difficult for harmed children to protect or defend themselves. Much of sibling violence does not take place in front of the parents or caregivers, and they said when it does occur in front of them, the violence is often minimized due to the widely held beliefs that it helps toughen kids up and prepares them for life. So, accordingly, sibling violence is not often recognized as a form of abuse, even if the child's being harmed, right? This is a serious issue because a lot of people are just like, oh, they're just kids, they're just playing. It's good for them to be able to work their stuff out. But a lot of, many times in sibling abuse situations, especially if the child who's doing the abusing is much larger than the other child, or if they are older, quite a bit older, it can be a problem because the other child can't defend themselves. There's no way they could defend themselves. So that's abuse. That's not playing between siblings. And the reason this is important to me is because there was a lot of violence. I grew up in a home full of abuse and um, all sorts of abuse, domestic violence and whatnot. There was also violence between the children, my siblings, and like harmful violence, life threatening stuff. And one of my siblings actually raped me. So this can happen. It does happen in families, unfortunately. I'm a survivor of incest. And, I was 8 years old. My brother was 13 years older than me, so he was 21. And he was a heroin addict and very psychologically unwell. So, nothing was done. I told my mom what was going on. She didn't get me any help. And this can happen in families. This is not okay. But, I'm a survivor, and I'm here to say that this goes on. And people, if some people say, "Oh, this would never happen in my family," but it does. It happens wherever the children are. And so, you need to protect your children. If you're a parent watching this, you need to make sure that your children are not being abused by the other children around them. You know, whether it's siblings or cousins or close family members who they have a lot of contact with. Right? They go on to talk about ways that you can help your children, to protect themselves. And they said that research tells a different story. Sibling violence is harmful and may have serious short term and long term impacts. So they say, why? Well, when a man hits his partner, we call it intimate partner violence. They say a man, but I mean women abuse too, so that's obvious, right? They don't have that there, but that's very true. So when one partner hits another partner, let's just say they call it intimate partner violence. When parents hit their children, we call it child abuse maltreatment. When a child repeatedly ridicules their classmate, we call it bullying. Yet when a sibling hits a brother or sister, we call it horseplay, playing around, having fun. It's not fun for the recipient of that, from those blows from the other sibling, and so it's very, very important. They said here, how can we identify sibling violence? Three facets to consider when trying to identify sibling violence: perception, intent, and severity. Perception: how does each sibling view and understand the interaction? So if one sibling feels that the behavior is abusive, regardless of whether he or she is the harmed child or the child inflicting the violence, it is likely that the scenario is not one of normal sibling conflict. Two, intent. What is the intent of the sibling's behavior? When sibling violence is present, the intent of the child inflicting violence is typically to cause injury or harm. And this is different than sibling rivalry, where one sibling or more attempts to gain access to limited family resources, for instance, space, time, and affection. So this would be a child with, a sibling who is actually trying to harm. It has the intent is to harm the other child, and that's a serious issue. Severity: what is the duration and intensity of the behavior? Sibling violence may involve repeated patterns of abuse with the intent to harm, humiliate, and defeat. Normally, this type of behavior escalates over time and enforces victim and perpetrator roles. So it is a big deal, and a lot of families don't address it. And then they take that on into adulthood, and they feel, these whether it's a child, a male child or a female child, doesn't matter, whatever. They may feel that that's just the way that they can deal with things and take that into their adult lives as well. Sibling violence largely involves three forms of abuse: psychological, physical, and sexual. I mean, that's just the norm for abuse, right? It's either physical or it's psychological or it's sexual. I mean, this is just it. Psychological abuse is any act that diminishes a sibling's sense of identity, dignity, and self worth. And this is likely to be constant and intense. For example, examples include ridicule, degradation, belittling, intimidation, scorn, provocation, destruction of possessions, and torturing and killing of a sibling's pets. I mean, that's just downright. That's psychological, and that's downright not okay. And we see adults doing stuff like that to other adults as well as to children, and that's abuse. But when siblings do it to another sibling, oh, they're just it's just brother sister stuff, or it's they need to learn how to deal with stuff. It's like, no, no, they really shouldn't have to learn how to deal with them being abused. They need to be protected from this kind of stuff. And the person, the child who's perpetrating this needs to be dealt with so that they can get help, right? Because they're going to take that into their adult life and it's going to cause them a lot of problems. Physical abuse by a sibling occurs when one sibling intentionally causes physical harm and pain to a sister or brother. This includes shoving, hitting, slapping, kicking, biting, pinching, scratching, and hair pulling, like any of that stuff. That's abuse. And between kids, you see that a lot. Like kids will pull each other's hair, little, getting little spats, you know. But when it's an issue where one sibling is just constantly picking on another one and shoving them and hitting them and slapping them, then the parent should be doing something about that because that's not okay. But I see stuff like that all the time. I work in a market. I work in the public. I can see all kinds of stuff between siblings, and I'm just looking at those parents like, you know, you guys need to be doing something about that. You know what I mean? Like, but you can't. What are you going to say? They'd be like, well, you could just mind your own business. And then you got to wonder where these kids are getting that from. I mean, are they watching that at home? Is that what they're seeing their parents do? Or is that what they're seeing on TV or, in their Xbox games, whatever those games are called nowadays? I don't even know what the modern stuff is anymore. Where are they seeing that violence and why are they perpetrating it? And, you know, this is something that needs to be, they would say nipped in the bud. Like you really got to catch that quick with children because it's a learned behavior. They see something, they think it's okay for them to do that too. And my siblings were violent, but we grew up in a violent home, so it's obvious where they were seeing this stuff was between my parents and the abuse that my parents were dishing out on us as well and on each other. And my parents didn't care about the children. Obviously, they were abusing us, so it was not a big deal for if the other siblings were abusing the other siblings. It didn't really matter to them because they didn't care about their kids. But even when there's no abuse between the parents, um, and the children are involved in sibling abuse, it's some child in the family is abusing another sibling. A lot of times the parents just don't want to deal with it, and they think, oh well, they'll just grow out of it, you know. And it's really harsh. Oh, I've got a good friend here. Hi, Laurie. How are you? Thanks for being here with me. I appreciate it, and I hope you're well. I'm just talking about sibling abuse tonight. Looking at a great PDF that I found. Um, I'm going to make sure that the link is in the actual show page, and it's from VawLearningNetwork.ca. It's called Sibling Abuse, and it just really brought a lot of really awesome attention to the issue. I think it's very thorough. Oh, I'm glad that you're here. This is what I've been doing for the month of April. I missed a few days just I was busy and I had some issues going on with some allergies and stuff. So I thought it was allergies. It might have been a cold, but um, I'm glad to be back. I'll be back on every night now through until the end of uh, April. So just bringing you attention, child abuse prevention and what to watch out for. But I hope you're okay. And I know I've missed you. I haven't been around too much. And so it's good to see you. So, yeah, this is a serious, serious issue. Sexual abuse, this is another form of sibling abuse that can occur. Sexual abuse is behavior between siblings that is not age appropriate, not transitory, and not motivated by developmentally appropriate curiosity. So, sibling sexual abuse may involve sexual touching or rape and also includes, forcing children to engage in sexual activity with each other, stuff like this. Um, I'm not going to really go on and read the rest of that. You can read that. This sort of thing, I mean, this is not okay. And not when it's, not two very close in age young children who are just curious about their own bodies and it's not really sexual. It's just they're just trying to figure, they're just interested, you know what I mean? Um, I mean, this is really not okay. I'm a survivor of incest, CSA incest, by my brother who raped me. I was just 8 years old, and from 8 to 9, he raped me. He was 13 years older than me. He was a grown man, 21 years old, and he knew what he was doing, and it was for his own sexual gratification. Um, and it wasn't a game, and he didn't set it up as a game. I was just raped. I was just violently raped, and I'm barren to this day because of it. My mother didn't do anything to help me. And after about a year, she shipped him to Canada with a one-way ticket. So, he was just mentally ill, very, very psychologically unwell, and he was a heroin addict and a cocaine user. So he was heavy drugs and just really messed up. So the issue is this stuff does happen. I'm not going to name names. I mean, I'll talk about myself freely, but I know lots of people who are survivors of sibling incest. And because I belong to support groups, so I would never give information about people's names or who these people are. But I'll just tell you that it's more common than you know, more common than you think. Back in the old days, this stuff was so taboo that nobody would talk about it. People think this is something new, that this all just started happening recently. This has been going on since time began, and the issue is that people used to just hush it up, you know, because it's like we don't talk about that stuff, and we don't want anybody to know that this went on in our family. So the victim gets no help whatsoever. The perpetrator gets to keep on doing whatever they want to do, and to whoever they want to do it to, because there's going to be nothing done. This is the way it was. Now people are speaking out, like people like me, and several other many hundreds, if not thousands, of people. I'm just one more person who's willing to be honest, and it's like this needs to be talked about. Where's the help for the victims of this sort of stuff? Why are victims just silenced even further by family or by society, because society just doesn't want to hear about this stuff? And it's like the courts need to hear about this stuff. The police officers need to hear about this stuff. That's a crime. It's an actual crime. There's nothing okay about that, about any type of this abuse that I've been talking about here tonight so far. It's not okay. And what people are going to arrest their 8-year-old child or their 12-year-old son or their 13-year-old daughter. The issue is those children, if they're now, my brother was older, he was 21 years old, so he would have, if my parents would have done the right thing and got me some help, even if they would have pressed charges back in those days, the courts would have dropped it, and he would have probably been allowed to remain in the home. Believe it or not, this is just the way it is. That's right, Laurie. It just destroys the victim's life, and you know it's not okay. And it's the courts nowadays are much better than they used to be about enforcing this sort of thing, and the laws and the sentencing really isn't strict enough. It's not strong enough. It's kind of like, oh well, we'll give you a couple of years. It's like, I mean, I've read that. I've seen the headlines. I've been watching the headlines for years, and people who do this kind of stuff, it's like a little slap on the wrist. Somebody rapes somebody in the family, or even somebody on their block or something. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And what, 6 months in jail or something, some silly thing like that. This is a crime, and we all need to be speaking out against this stuff. That's absolutely ridiculous. But children, I mean, this article is really geared for children perpetrating abuse on children, and it does happen. I've known many survivors who were sexually abused by by a sibling who, maybe wasn't all that much older than them at the time, but they were still abused by this sibling. It's not always boys, it can be girls too. So it's not just boys. Um, and yeah, that's right, Laurie. Laurie says the victims can't even talk about it for others to know. Yeah, well, that's just it. See, and especially back in even the 50s, 1950s, 1960s, even in the 70s, you know, yeah, absolutely. People are afraid, and a lot of times, they don't want to say anything. I told my mom because I was only 8 years old, and I was really not in good shape after being raped by my brother. Um, and I told her, after a few times that what he was doing, and she was just like, "That's not my problem. That's your problem." And I'm like, okay, but my mom was my abuser, so I was like not going to push it with her. She was one of my abusers. So yeah, it's terrible. It's a very terrible thing. I know other survivors who've come forward with this, and who in publicly, which I won't name names anyway, but they're out there, and they had such a hard time, and even within their families, got no support, um, and just made to look at like well, they were the bad, like they were the victims in this, being sexually abused by another family member, by a sibling, and then the family just looked at them like, you know, why did you have to go make waves? You didn't, in other words, it's their fault. It's like they don't care that the other sibling's the one who's really responsible for the issue. So this goes along with we're not just talking about sexual abuse here, child sexual abuse. We're talking about physical abuse, psychological abuse. You know, it's not okay. None of this stuff is okay. And family members need to support the victims. But quite often they don't, because the victims looked at as the troublemaker, because they need help. And it's like, well, couldn't you have just gone and crawled under the carpet and locked yourself in the closet and never come out, and then we wouldn't have to deal with this stuff? Families just don't want to deal with this stuff. And um, that's just too bad. You know what I mean? It's like me. I went public, and I'm like, I don't care. You know, my family was, an abusive mess, and so I would get no support from them anyway. So I don't care if they like it or not that I went public with this stuff, and I don't get support from them anyway. So I'm like, oh well, too bad. I'm going to talk about it, and I don't care who likes it. It's not okay. This stuff nowadays, there is a whole lot more help for people who are, who the issues have been going on. Parents can get help, and they do talk about that in this article. So this article is a great article, and they go on to talk about how common is sibling violence. They said sibling violence, like other forms of abuse, can often go unreported for many reasons, including fear, embarrassment, shame, lack of recognition by the parents or caregivers that abuse is even happening. Right? When it's reported, siblings are often grouped together with other non-parental family members in data collection, making it difficult to assess the incidence of violence. And so, it's not. It's this is the thing. It's sibling violence, sibling abuse is really hasn't been until recent times considered abuse. It was all just, oh, that's just horseplay. They're just playing around, or they'll learn to fight back, and they'll learn how to defend themselves. Right? It's just not true. So they said factors associated with sibling violence. Despite the prevalence of sibling violence, research is typically focused on descriptive analysis rather than trying to explain what causes it. Although sibling violence is widespread, many children do not experience it. Well, thank God. A range of systematic and individual factors can contribute. Um, they talk about exposure to different forms of violence. That's what I was just talking about. What's going on at home, right? If the parents are abusing each other, one of the parents is abusing the other parent, or the caregivers, whoever the caregivers are in the situation, then the children are more apt to do this sort of stuff. I know in my case that's the situation. My dad was raping my mom. Um, my dad was beating up on the children as well as my mom, And yeah, Laurie, you're right. You weren't allowed to talk about it. No, that's right. Nobody wanted to hear about it. And and they still don't today. But people are like, I don't care. I'm talking about it, right? But I think that that's the issue. A lot of it has to do with what's going on in the home, um, and what the children are seeing. And if the parents are too busy fighting, whoever the caregivers are, the parents, whoever they are in the situation, looking after these children, if they're too busy with their own personal problems, which would be dealing with whatever substance abuse or domestic violence or whatever is going on in their lives, they're not going to have time to actually take care of those children properly and bring them up properly. Kids are witnessing violence. They might see their dad or their mom hitting the other partner, throwing things at them, cursing at them, or sexually abusing them, and then they just perpetrate that stuff too because they're like, well, this is what they do, so this is what we do. And that's kind of what was going on in my home. There was a lot of violence between my parents, and then my parents were abusing us, so my siblings just abused each other. And one of my brothers held a knife to my sister's throat and wanted her to take him on a drug run and all kinds of stuff. She was like, I think she was 16 or something. um, it's pretty sad. So siblings don't always stick together in a situation like that. They don't always try to to save the other siblings from abuse. Sometimes it turns into the issue where everybody in there is fighting for um, uh, really fighting to stay alive. That was the case in my family. My siblings were all being abused too, not just me. And so it was kind of like dog eat dog. You know, in order like nobody was going to protect anybody. In other words, right? So it's kind of like they almost like we as a group of children growing up in this abuse would get the other one in trouble so that the abuse would be on them and not on us. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like pointing fingers and they did it, and that way you don't get abused. Your sibling does, even if your sibling wasn't at fault, right? And a lot of that was going on in our home. Um, it's kind of like, well, try to get on your parents' good side just so that to save yourself from some abuse. And I know, like I don't know if that's typical, but I think it might be. But it's just bad when both parents are the abusers, right? It's kind of like, oh man. Well, it's terrible, but it does happen. I just laugh because it's like so ridiculous. It's hard to believe that people would treat their children like this. People would bring their children up in a situation like this. But that's why I went public with my stuff because I want people to see the truth about this and how mixed up it really gets. With the roles and family roles and what people expect you to play. My siblings, because I was the youngest, the baby in the family, and I wasn't wanted. My mom made it very clear that she didn't want me, and all the siblings knew that none of us were really wanted. Um, Obviously, we were all being abused, but the thing is a lot of times, like they were really rough on me. They were quite a bit older than me. My sister closest in age to me is 5 years older. So, and the next one's like 7 years older, and then on up like that. So they're all bigger and meaner and tougher than me. I was just a little girl. I took quite a lot of abuse from my siblings, but I didn't really hold that against them, that stuff. But my brother, when he raped me, I was 8 years old. So that really messed me up. And I mean, I didn't trust my siblings. I didn't trust my family, period. Um, but, you know, I didn't tell, like, I don't know if anybody else in the family knew except for my mom because I told my mom what was going on. And she just said, that's not my problem. That's your problem. You're going to have to deal with it. So, um, years later now that I've written the book, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, The Journey, talking about the CSA child sexual abuse and whatnot, my siblings, the ones that were living, have seen that. And I got no response from them whatsoever. I was talking to my sister one night about it, and no response. They just don't. They're just not there for me. Now they're almost all dead, right? They're all passed away now. Um, but it's just kind of this is the way it is for the victims, left with to pick up these pieces, and to try to, learn how to do life in the midst of this shattered life of growing up abused. And that's why I went public with my, including my healing journey, because I wanted people to see that this is not uncommon. And, there's so many of us out there, right, who have suffered these things. And, we all handle things differently, but we all share this commonality of being abused. And so that's why I went public, because I'm like, hey, one more voice out here. I'll just add mine to everybody else's out here, and try to hopefully help other survivors to realize they're not alone, and that there is hope out there, and you have to look for help. Help is not easily acquired, um, you know, but you just have to keep going. And what I decided to do was just not allow my abusers, which included my brother who raped me, um, to win this fight. I thought, no, I'm going to win. And I did win. And I do win. The victory's mine. Because they couldn't destroy me. They tried to. My parents did, and my sibling, my brother. And I'm like, no, I win because I'm having a good life, and I'm actually learning how to enjoy, you know, just my own, me, who I am, who they tried to destroy. And I'm like, yeah, you guys lost. I won, because I'm having a good life. And, you know, I've learned to love myself. And it's a little easier to love other people, but they always say you can't really love anybody till you love yourself. I've learned, through the years, a lot, I'm getting older now, that it's very important, to go back and love all those wounded parts of myself of who I was, through the years, because of the abuse, even the ugly parts, that are unlovable. I've learned how to love that part of myself and actually accept it and be okay with it, you know. So it's not easy, but we have to keep going. And I know there's so many survivors, especially of CSA, child sexual abuse, sibling incest. And I just know there's so many out there. I just know so many people who are, which I won't give names, like I said. And, my heart breaks for them too. Like we're all in the same boat. And they get no support, like I said, from their families. And we just have to keep going. Pick up your head, man. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I decided to do. I'm like, there's no way these guys are going to, like, shame me into feeling bad because, my brother raped me when I was 8 years old. I was just a little girl. And, it wasn't my fault. I'm like, well, that's okay. I have to be okay with myself at the end of the day, and I am. Um, my brother who actually raped me, he killed himself at the age of 33. When I was 20, he was 33 and he committed suicide. So I had gone to a gynecologist, and it was for my first checkup. And they were like, the damages, we see it like you would need reconstructive surgery because, if you want to have children, you're not going to be able to have children. Like, you know, we doubt you'll be able to even get pregnant, seriously, like just because of the damage done. I'm like, well, no, never mind that. So they said, well, you know, sorry about that. They were like, well, we're gonna report it as we see it, CSA child sexual abuse. And so I'm like, okay, whatever. They said, well, you can press charges if you want to. And I'm like, well, I would, but my brother killed himself last year. And they were like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm like, well, it's just my life. This is the way it is, right? So yeah, no children for me. And, I did actually get pregnant with my husband, and we lost our baby. I was not able to carry it. So, and then we tried again. We tried to have children and couldn't have any more children. So I never got pregnant again. So the damage is so that CSA child sexual abuse made me barren. So he stole something that was very, very important to me. And that was children. And I'll never be able to get that back. And it's I've had to learn how to live with that. It's like, okay, well, that's just something that was stolen from me. I can't really change it. So I'm gonna have to enjoy life apart from that, and enjoy what comes my way every day. So there's nothing you can really do about stuff like that. It's really horrible. And did a, he needed help. My parents, my parents who were responsible for abusing him and abusing us, should have got they should have got help when the courts busted them for child abuse, brought them up on child abuse charges. They were charged with child abuse. They were told to get counseling and all this. We had CPS workers around, for a couple of years. They they just continued on. They just liked their lifestyle of this horrible, abusive, violent tirades that they love to throw, and ruined their children. And they tried to ruin all of our lives, but they didn't succeed with me. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm like, yeah, the victory is mine. Because, I've learned how to live life and do life drug free, alcohol free. I mean, I smoke cigarettes. That's just sanity factor stuff. You know what I mean? I've never really been able to really kick the nicotine habit. But I got off the drugs at the age of 22. I was a heavy drug user until 22 years old. And I knew I was heading for, the same uh, destruction. I was either going to kill myself or I was going to end up dead in a drug deal or, just overdose in the gutter or something. And so I was like, I got to get off the drugs. So I got off the drugs and I've done really well for somebody who came from such horrible stuff. You know what I mean? And like I said, it's the day to day stuff. Through my healing journey stuff. All of that stuff is one child abuse survivor to another here on YouTube. I've done like 600 shows or something like that, just talking through the issues and what they are and how how it affected me in my own walk, just in hopes that other people and other survivors who have been abused within a family situation, any type of abuse, would maybe be able to get some validation and be able to say, "Wow, I've been through that too." I'm not alone, and then sort of be able to see what I've done to actually be able to move through this stuff and do quite a lot of healing work. I mean, would I say I'm actually fully healed? I don't think I ever will be. But, I'm at a place in my life right now where things are pretty good. You know what I mean? It's like as good as it's probably going to get. I feel pretty good these days about myself, about who I am. I'm not thinking about killing myself anymore. And, I mean, things are pretty good. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And I want to do as much as possible with the time that I have left to actually be able to enjoy my life. So I play guitar, and I love to just think about good things. I don't just sit around thinking about abuse all the time. Even though I do a lot of broadcasting and stuff like that, my mind is not just focused on that. I'm focused on good stuff too, and sharing whatever I can that's good, and just finding myself in this place. So it doesn't have to be all bad. And with my parents, sadly enough, my parents were abused as children, both of them. And they came together, and I think they thought when they got married that they were going to be able to escape all that and they were going to be able to have this good life. And they didn't realize that it takes a lot of work. And, coming from abuse, you do have to change the way that you behave. You know what I mean? Like you can't just keep that up. And I think that's what happened to them is they realized that they came from abuse, and then they were each of them saying, no, I'm going to get my way, I'm going to get my way. And they both just tore each other apart and their children. So yeah, I watched this unfold. I knew they were both abused as children, and they had such horrible lives, my parents I'm talking about, and caused us to have horrible lives. And I'm like, so when I started my healing journey, I really realized, that I needed to change a lot of things in myself. I needed to change the way I thought about myself, first of all. And, I needed to change the way that I thought about life, right? Because I was always considering suicide. It was just something that was always on my mind. And, I had to change the way I was thinking and the way that I felt about myself. That was a big, big part of it. And, I thought, I'm not doing what my parents did. I'm just not doing that. I'm going to live, I'm going to learn how to do this, and I'm going to have a good life. But you have to want to make those changes. And it's hard because you have to start somewhere. It's kind of like, okay, this is not going to be fun dealing with this stuff. I got help through support groups. I had a lot of help through a friend also who used to be a psychotherapist who happened to be my friend. So I got a lot of help from her. So yeah, I mean, it depends. It just whatever works for you. Counseling, therapy, you know, self help. Mainly, that's what I did. Self help stuff because I didn't trust anybody really too much with my information. I just was like, no, let's do it myself. But I found support groups very, very helpful, and the ASCA Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. That's a great one, and also the one for incest survivors or even child sexual abuse survivors is SIA, and that's the SIA organization. So if you need any information or you're looking for info for people, for groups and stuff that I've dealt with that I find very trustworthy, I can definitely give you that. Well, thank you, Laurie. I appreciate it. And I know, like, I'm not the only one. That's why I'm doing these shows, because I know there's a whole, you know, world full of people who have been just so wounded. And so, even yourself, I mean, with your story, it's just, it's unbelievable that you're still here and you're doing so wonderful yourself. You're such a beautiful person and you have a beautiful voice. I love your music and I love your songs, and your voice is just so beautiful. Um, yeah, so many people, around the world, just millions and millions and millions of people have been just so wounded. And, you know, I just feel like if we don't keep talking about this stuff, it just gets shoved back under the carpet. And that's what most of, especially abusers, that's what they want. It's like they don't want people talking about this because they like to abuse, you know what I mean? Whether it's abuse, an adult or a child. So that's why I keep talking about it. I'm like, no, I'll just keep talking about it, because the more people talking about this stuff, the more that's done. The more people work towards changing the laws to protect children from abuse. First of all, you know, and adults, getting help, getting out of abusive situations and getting help for your life. So important. If you're being abused right now, if you're a young person, get help. Get help. Don't allow yourself to be abused, even if it's sibling abuse or any type of abuse. You should not be being abused. So if you're a young person and you just happen to be catching this show, you need to tell as many people as you can, not one person. If you tell one person, let's say you know somebody you think you can trust, and you tell them, and then they don't do anything to get you any help, you know that's not going to help you. You need to tell a lot. You need to report it online, to a child protection website. Report it to your teachers. Report it to all sorts of people that can help you to get out of that abuse. Right? It's so important. And it's important for adults to get out of that abuse. I know lots of people who are in domestic violence situations, and it just breaks my heart, you know, because I don't want to see them become another statistic, you know. It's I talked about domestic violence earlier this month. If you want to go catch that show, but the shelters here in Calgary are full 365 days a year, so it doesn't matter. It's not like it's only a certain time of year that it's full. These shelters in Calgary are full 365 days. We're talking about domestic violence and abuse shelters. People, basically getting out and trying to save their lives. And it's not just women, it's men too, because there are lots of women who abuse and other male partners. Um, so, men are abused too, right? So, and they do have shelters here for men. It's just so important not to allow yourself to be abused. It's just terrible. And yeah, it's just kind of it's just the way the world is. So the whole world's going around, people, and the cycle of abuse continues on. And when are we going to say enough? You know, like that's why I really like what Donna Shear and Lee Roberts are doing. I mean, they're just out there getting laws changed. That's what they do. They're just out there. Yeah, we're going to get the laws changed. We're going to protect children from abuse. And they just keep working at it. Keep working at it. I love it. I'm just a voice, behind this. There's not much I really do. Whereas those guys are action behind the words, and I really appreciate that. Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I just love to see the work they're doing. It's great, and they're just regular people, and they just don't mind making noise, and that's what I do too. I'm just out here speaking, and talking, about the issues about child abuse, and um, yeah, it's just so important. Yeah, when we this is the thing. See, back in so many years ago, even in the '60s and '70s, it was just so taboo to talk about abuse. It's like, you just didn't talk about abuse, right? Nowadays, a lot of people are talking about it, and it's very important that we do. There's this generation that I'm in, is eventually here is going to be dying off here. And then we need the next generations, the younger people, to come up and take our place. And I see a lot of young people doing this now, this work of, child abuse prevention awareness. And it's wonderful to see these people out here doing this, these young people, because this is what it's going to take. It has to be the next generations to keep this going if we're going to see real difference and real change in the issues that are, they're killing children every day. Children are dying from abuse, whether they're killed outright or they're just dying from the actual abuse. So many days later or so many weeks later, they're dying. They're ending up in body bags in the morgue. We need to keep, you know, working at this, all of us, to bring attention to this and be aware that it is happening, and it's probably happening on your street. One in I think it's pretty much straight across the board now. One in 4 to 5 girls and boys are being abused at any given time. So if you're in a group of 5 people, one of you, or even two or more, maybe have experienced abuse, or if you're children, you may be being abused, right? So, you got to protect your own children. You got to protect children around you. This is so important. And yeah, that's right. The younger generation, and they are stepping up to the plate, and that's awesome. I'm so glad to see it. So they said factors associated with sibling violence: exposure to different forms of violence. For instance, there's abuse going on in the home, let's just say, and that's just how they deal with things. That's what I was talking about earlier. Was just that my siblings we were all just doing what we were taught to do by watching our parents. This is what we do. We just beat on each other, rape each other. I mean, that was the mentality. It's like, hold a knife to your sister's throat and threaten to kill her. This kind of stuff. Terrible, absolutely terrible. Acceptance of abuse, normalizing abuse within the family has been found to influence the severity and frequency of abuse among siblings. For instance, when the parents' model of inappropriate sexual behaviors and interactions or condone abusive behaviors, a child may act in the same way with a sibling. They're just doing what they see, because that's what children will do. Unhealthy family relationships, right? Unstable parental behavior, disorganized family structures, all of this stuff creates a real problem for children within the home. And oh yeah, all sorts of stuff. Experiences of bullying. Right? This can link, um, you know, the link to peer bullying exists for survivors and perpetrators of sibling abuse. So violence in one context may teach children that violence is an acceptable way to behave in other settings. Right? And they go ahead. This is an amazing article, and we're not even looking at it all. It's just amazing. Red flags that your child may be experiencing sibling violence. That's what to look for. Experiences of sibling violence across different groups of families and children. They talk about the impacts of sibling abuse can be lifelong, and of course, I mean, it's just like any other type of abuse. It's just like bullying or or any type of abuse. It's going on within the home. So people might say, well, maybe it's not as bad as maybe bullying on the schoolyard because those kids are being bullied by another child who isn't their sibling. Um, but I would say it's almost worse because, when I was, just for instance, when I was growing up, my sister was 5 years older than me, but we always had to share a room because we were the two girls. My other sister was 18 years older, moved out and had kids, so she wasn't in the house. Um, my other sister was 5 years older than me. We always shared a room because we were the two girls, and the rest of the boys all slept wherever. Um, and my sister, because she was 5 years older, really was just really wanting her own space. I don't really blame her, but she actually would put. I had a little bed on sort of on the floor, and she had a bigger bed, and she would put Kleenex boxes around my bed, and I wasn't allowed to step out of those out of bounds out of the Kleenex boxes because if I did, she'd come over and pound on me. I'd be like, and then if I started crying, my mom would come in and beat on me. So it was kind of like, just sort of take it. And then you have to learn how to take it because otherwise, if mom hears you, then she's going to come in and start bashing you. So it's kind of like taking abuse from all sorts of siblings within my home. And, some of it I just let it go because I'm like, whatever, you know what I mean? But not the rape, that was ridiculous that he got away with that. And that my mom didn't do anything to stop it. And I'm not surprised because my mom, she wasn't going to handle anything within that family. She was my main abuser. So, but I didn't want to go to my dad to tell my dad because my dad was very psychologically unwell, and I was kind of worried he might kill me. So well, I tried. I thought, well, maybe mom will help me, and that's just sad, but this is the way it is. And many times children just don't have support within the home, not even another sibling. So, um, it's not actually that uncommon, unfortunately. I always think there has to be some families out there with somebody in the family that actually is normal, and these normal relationships where they actually get along. I've seen it in a few families where people actually get along and they care about each other and maybe even love each other a little bit. It's like, hey, bro, I love you. But it's not a lot. I think most families are pretty dysfunctional, and it's pretty sad. But just from what I've witnessed, I've seen a lot of really horrible stuff between, in other families too. So, but I have seen a couple families that were quite normal in their reactions towards each other, and caring and loving. And I'm like, wow, that's different. That's weird. I really thought that was strange because I was, especially when I was growing up, because I was like, that's not what's going on in my home. I was like, it's kind of nice over here. It's like I'd be at some of my friends' house and I'd be like, this is great. Can I move? It was just normal. And I was like, wow, this is weird. Nobody's beating on each other. Nobody's throwing things at each other. Nobody's cursing each other. I like this. I think a lot of families are very dysfunctional, just from what I've seen. I'm sure there's some normal families out there. Normal, what's normal? Just families that just don't beat up on each other. And when they have an argument or whatever, it shouldn't escalate to actual beatings or physical violence or psychological abuse, verbal abuse. Families, this is the problem with I think, with the world today. People don't sit down and just have a conversation. It has to become some horrible situation. Like, we should all be able to sit down and just talk, you know, and just you work things out. You know what I mean? It shouldn't come to blows and, I'm going to kill you and, whatever. But we've all become, I think, that's just human nature, unfortunately, so horribly violent. And then you see it on TV all the time. Kids grow up watching that stuff. I just grew up watching violence in my home, so um, I didn't really, TV really wasn't the impact for me. Whereas, yeah, now young people today are seeing a lot of violence on TV and movies and stuff like that. It's just the norm for them now. For me, it was just violence in my home, which was very scary, and people getting hurt, including myself. So you know, um, that has a major impact on people. And then they go on and they perpetrate it themselves. And did all of my siblings do that? Well, I mean, one of my sister, the oldest of the family, the oldest daughter, she was the firstborn. She was abusive to her husband. And I did talk about that on the show. She was terribly abusive to him. And we were like, he would tell us stuff that she was doing, and we were just being mom, you know, I'm going to be top dog here, just like, the way that I saw our mom, you know, trying to handle her stuff. My mom was, you know, being abused by my dad, right? So I think my sister was like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm going to be the abuser, right? Which is sad, but true. This can happen. One of my other sisters, the other sister, closer in age to me, did not become an abuser. And she raised her daughter very, very lovely, very well. She's a good mom. Um, and, she just really was quite old. He just passed away a few years ago here. He was sort of an abuser, but not towards his wife because he loved his wife, but towards their son. And so that's kind of sad, but that's really true. And I had no idea. None of us knew about it, but found out later that he was. And that's sad. My other siblings died, so they didn't get a chance to be parents, which is a good thing because they probably would have abused them. Two of my siblings committed suicide, and one of my other siblings was killed and murdered. So at the age of 19, so he didn't have a chance. But yeah, out of a family of seven children, only two of my siblings actually had children, and I would have probably had children if I wouldn't have been raped as a child and made barren. So I don't know if it'd be such a good idea. It's probably okay that I didn't have children. But the thing is that you know this is life for so many people, and so many people then because they're growing up in this situation, whether being abused by their parents or by a sibling or some other family member, then can't cope. And they either end up becoming the abuser in the situation or they implode and they just destroy what's left of their lives, which they feel, I'm sure, that is already destroyed because of the abuse. So So many people are living these horrible, horrible lives because they were abused as children. That's why if even if the children don't die because of the abuse, so many will live. So many, like I managed to live. So many will live and then have these horrible, horrible lives. Not all, because some survivors, just depending on severity and the issue, if they get help, especially at a young age, which really makes a big difference. There's lots of different scenarios, but I'm talking the majority. The majority of abuse survivors do not get help. And the majority of abuse survivors, the abuse was allowed to happen and continue, and nobody did anything about it. And they were just expected to just take it and shut up and move on down, scoot off and go take your problem somewhere else, because dysfunctional families really aren't set up to help anybody in the family. So it's really difficult for people, you know, and we need so much work done on this. We really do. It itself, it always has been an epidemic. It's a pandemic, just like they say pandemic. Well, it's been an epidemic and a pandemic for so many thousands of years. It's just before 18 before mid 1800s, it was just the norm to go ahead and kill children and just bury them like whatever. But now it's kind of like, no, there's people standing up and saying children have rights, and I'm one of those people. And I study child rights. So I would have probably done a lot more if I would have had more time and more money to go to school. I would have probably been gotten into some sort of law and child protection, like child rights and stuff. Because child rights are very important to me. Children have the right to life. They have the right to an abuse-free life. I already did a show on this. It was like one of the first shows. And children actually have the right to not be abused. So if that's the case, then how come so many of them are being abused? It's not always a parent. I mean, sometimes it's a teacher, it's a neighbor, it's a coach, it's a pastor, it's a priest, it's a youth leader, it's another kid in the school. You name it. Perpetrators are whoever's perpetrating the abuse is whoever's around your child, whoever's around that child. So that's why it's very important. If you're a parent and you're listening to this, you've got to do whatever you can to protect your children. And just know that there's people out there that would love to hurt your child, and that they're looking for the next vulnerable child to get a hold of, right? So make sure that you know how to protect your children, get the facts, and keep your children safe if you're listening to this and you have children. It's so important. Thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it, Laurie. And, I just appreciate everybody who's taken the time to listen and, just to support my work. I really appreciate it. Everything I do, I just do because I really care about children, and I'd like to see, more work being done. And I can only do so much. We all can only do so much in our own circles, but I just appreciate everybody who's taken the time to listen and be part of my shows and actually just, spreading the word. Um, and, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Tomorrow night, I'll be back on, be same time, same place. I'm going to do the show page tomorrow so I don't ding people. I'm just doing them one day, each day as they come. So we'll be back on tomorrow night, same time, same place. I hope you have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, Lori. Bye, everybody.